Oh, it feels so good to be back. I missed you last Monday, but we had a really awesome 20th wedding anniversary celebration. That's all. It was just great. It was something that we'll never forget, and it was really great because we got to have all of our entire family together, and that was just something. How do you measure the value of that? So this Monday, I am going to talk about something. I did a post on my Instagram about a week ago, and people really, it seemed to resonate with people, and it's something that I've thought about a lot, and I was like, I should do a podcast about it. This is what I put on the quote that I posted. The most dangerous phrase in the language is, "We've always done it that way." And I think that it's easy to get stuck personally, professionally, even, and I thought about this as I was working on the podcast today, even just in how we present ourselves, how we look, how we see ourselves. Sometimes as we travel across the country, we've noticed in different geographical places that people dress similarly or have a similar hairstyle, and we're always like, I guess it's just because it's what they've always done. And so that was my topic. I get up this morning as I'm preparing for it, getting ready to do my notes, and literally I open up my devotional. My bracelet's being loud, I'm taking it off. I open up my devotional, and the first sentence in today's devotional said this: just because you've done something doesn't mean just because you've never done something doesn't mean you never will. And just because you've always done something doesn't mean you always will. Which is just another way of saying, if you've always done things one way, it doesn't mean that you should always continue. Career-wise, I've shared this recently on podcasts, that I've had a couple kind of revelations in my own life beyond the scope of mother, including this podcast and other things, but even something that I hadn't thought that I would ever want to go back to, and I'll be sharing about it very, very soon. I sat and I did some reflecting about why did I let that go in my life when there was a long period of my life where it was really important. I started to assess what I loved about my involvement with this other side business, and I was like, why don't I do it again? And I kind of surprised myself that I even allowed myself to think about it in that way. I've shared too, at the last tribute, it was the 7th year. We've been working on our sponsorship deck. We're always looking for great sponsors, by the way, for tribute. And I was looking at it, working on it this weekend, going, wow, the evolution of those 7 years, because I went and I looked back at photos. Number one, I'm thankful, especially after year 2, that we didn't say, well, that was a disappointment, or that was a failure. And it wasn't that it was a failure, but it was a challenging year. So you rethink, how can we do things in a different way? Just because we've done it this way, is there another way that we can do it? And now, as we're putting everything together for this year, I'm so excited that we haven't kept ourselves in a box of, well, we've always done it that way. Something that happened in the past couple of weeks. Number one, we have a great model that we discovered who we're super excited about. She has a really interesting backstory. I mean, a lot of the people that we come in contact do, but I feel like hers is unique in several ways. She went to New York for the first time, and she had dabbled in modeling in her area where she's from. So we see that a lot where aspiring models or models are like, well, this is how I've always done it in where I'm from. And so this is how I feel like I should continue to do it. In her case, she's been so open, listened to our advice, listened to our direction, went to New York, got a phenomenally positive, overwhelmingly great response. And on the second day that she was in New York, we got a call and they were like, what do you think about this? And they'd send an email about a hairstyle change, which I'm always about a hairstyle change. I always think, wow, how would they look like this? Or what about this? But you'd be surprised how many people are like, well, I've always done my hair like this, or this is how I see myself. One of the things I appreciated about her is she was open. She wasn't in, well, this is how I have always looked. And she had already taken that advice. I'm very often telling girls, lay off the tanning, grow in your eyebrows, what about this change or that change? And I really love when somebody is open to it, because I feel like part of being great as a model is you have to be willing to be a chameleon and be open to seeing yourself in a different way. So long story short, they cut her hair. It looks amazing, but it's so different from who she has been up until this point in her 21 years of life. And I love that she was open to, even though this is always how I've always done it, I'm gonna try this way. We have another girl that she submitted to us. I remember Jeff saying, what do you think? We looked at her, and this happens a lot, sadly. We're like, I'd love to see her with not all the makeup. And because it was, we were looking at pictures on social media, I'm telling you, every single picture was so filtered that we really couldn't tell what she looked like. We had her come in, super sweet girl, also a very interesting backstory. I was like, let your tan fade. Would you consider going a little darker with your hair? We need to trim it up a bit. Gave her all this, direction, which, trust me, I do that a lot, and lots of times people just don't do it. Not that they have to, but I love that she was open to seeing herself in a different way. So she came in this past week, and all these subtle things added up to a different version of herself. Still being true to herself, but a more fashion-forward look. And I was shocked. I was like, wow. I love that she was open. I love that she did the changes. And now we see her not as the typical blonde, pretty girl, but as a model. And it's back to that way of allowing yourself to see yourself in a different way, allowing yourself to be open. This morning, I had all intentions. I was like, I'm gonna get up early. We talked about it last night. Let's do the podcast first thing in the morning, get it done, because we have a meeting coming up in an hour or so. So it just seemed like the ideal thing to do. The interesting thing, and I honestly am really thankful for it, is the morning ended up being 3 different conversations, one with one of our kids, and one with a brand new model, and one with another model, the model who's in New York. And to have these conversations, the first one with the girl who's going to be she's getting ready to travel to New York for the first time, her openness, okay, well, yes, I've never really done that before, but I am going to be open to that. And thank you. And I just hear in her the openness to possibility. And when you get in the rut of doing things the way that you've always done them, or having that mentality, I don't think you realize how much that limits growth. And even if it's in little daily changes, it's amazing over an accumulating ripple of time what an impact it has. The other conversation I had was with the girl who I talked about who cut her hair. She has her first kind of really big important casting today. So she said, can you talk? Of course I said yes. I got on the phone with her. And she had, in normal, it's not unusual to talk to other models and go, what's this going to be like? Or have you ever experienced this? Or what's the casting? Or have you met with this casting director? And whether or not it was intentional, I could tell that the conversation, the feedback that she'd gotten from these other models had kind of freaked her out a little bit, which is fair. So the first piece of advice I gave her, and we give this to a lot of our models, don't listen to other models. Only because it can fill you up with it doesn't really matter what happened with that person or if this experience. I'm not saying that other models can't advise each other in other ways, but I've seen way too many times people kind of fill the head of somebody that makes them more anxious or nervous, and then you're living in what isn't the most important thing, which is living in the now, being open to your unique experience and knowing that things are going to be different for you. You know, that's just the reality of it. A big part of being stuck in this is the way that we've always done it is also conversations, not only that you have with yourself, but conversations that you have with other people that will have a tendency to fill you up with not being willing to try new things or do new things or do what you've already been doing it and doing it in a different way. I truly believe that one of the reasons why we've continued to grow is because we always allow ourselves to think of new ways or to look at how quickly things are changing and shifting, not just in our business. I'm sure in whatever arena you are in, you experience the same thing. There's value in stepping back and evaluating and looking at, could things be done a little bit differently? And if I did them just a little bit differently, what could happen from that? And even if you try it and it doesn't work, it opens you up to the possibility of being open to the process of trying and eliminating. And instead of viewing things like that as a failure, you learn to look at those things as, excuse me, we tried something new. Even if it doesn't lead you to where you think it is, I've also had where it takes us to a completely different path that had we just stuck in the way that we've been continuing to do things, we never would have experienced. Even how we go to Fashion Week, we talk about this all the time. Back in the day, we would literally run ourselves ragged. We would feel like we had to be there every second of every day and multitask in between multiple models, and we would practically collapse at the end of the day. And in the long haul of at that point, literally Fashion Week was a 6-week period from beginning to end, you would be exhausted. So through that period of time to go, how can we be present in a smarter way? And I really see how now even the way that we approach something like Fashion Week, we approach it in the way that we're there in the time frame that's most important. We're plugged in throughout the day, and you make yourself available without burning yourself out. Our culture is in dire straits, in my thought, of people feeling like they can't say no, or that they can't try things in a different way, or go, hey, I know that we've worked in this way up to this point, but this way is smarter, it's more efficient, and we can get more things done. And you apply that to not only your daily activity, your weekly activity, and in the long run, it takes you way farther. So whatever those things in your life that you feel like you can assess and say, I know I've done it always this way, but maybe if I try it that way. And as the devotional said this morning, which I think is so important, just because you've never done something doesn't mean you never will. And here's an even bigger one. And just because you've always done something doesn't mean you always will. Be open. Be open to the possibility of doing things in a different way. I appreciate you listening. I'm super excited about next week's topic also, which is all about fear and not being fearful. I hope you have a great week, and thanks so much for listening.